Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually think it's disrespectful, the treatment that we've just seen the Secretary undergo. I think it's respectful to suggest or imply that that the root causes of our broken immigration system are so simple that they can be answered in 2.5 seconds or less, that the solutions necessary to improve our immigration system for the needs of today and the future could be delivered in 2.5 seconds or less. So let me, for the moment, continue some questions on the subject matters that our Republican colleagues keep bringing up over and over and over again, and we'll stay on fentanyl for a second. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Secretary, but I think Senator Booker earlier mentioned that in 2021, it's been found that U.S. citizens accounted for more than 86% of convicted fentanyl drug traffickers. Does that sound about right to you?
Senator, as I mentioned to Senator Booker, I'm not familiar with that statistic. I'm certainly aware of the fact that American citizens are participating in the trafficking of illegal narcotics
The
across
reporting
the
in the
border.
cities that I've seen do document that the vast majority of those bringing fentanyl into the country are United States citizens, not the migrants that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are implying. Also, that nearly 99% of the consumers who are paying for illicit opioids, so we can look at both ends of this, right? Who's driving the demand, not just who may be responsible for the supply. Statistic, again, from federal agencies, 0.02% of the people arrested by Border Patrol for crossing the border illegally possessed fentanyl at the time.
More than 90% of the fentanyl brought into this country is brought in through the ports of entry.
Right.
I cannot overstate the viciousness and cruelty of the smuggling organizations. It is precisely why we are building safe, orderly, and lawful pathways for people to come to the United States if they are eligible, and cutting out the smuggling organizations.
And that's the point I'm trying to get to, Mr. Secretary. I want to sort of level set, sort of reality check the conversation, because the challenge is a serious one and should be approached with seriousness and maturity. So now that we've caught our breath from the prior exchange, I want to afford you an opportunity to speak into the administration's approach, the significance of a whole of government approach to the problem, not just whole of federal government, but any partnerships, real or potential, that you think can be value added here. I know in the state of California, for example, state resources are being committed to augment additional screening equipment and other technologies that can help in this cause in a productive manner.
So two different parts, Senator, and I appreciate the opportunity. The administration's approach to the migration challenge, which is quite serious, and it is one that is not exclusive to the United States, but is gripping the entire region. There are approximately 2.5 million Venezuelans in Colombia now. There is an unprecedented movement of people throughout the hemisphere. Our approach is to cut out the smugglers, who are indeed vicious and cruel, and to build safe, lawful, and orderly paths for people to arrive in the United States. And on January 5th, we announced a parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, that they could apply for entry into the United States in a safe and orderly way, and we would deliver consequences if they arrive irregularly in between our ports of entry at the southern border. We have seen a 95% drop in the number of encounters of those four nationalities in between our ports of entry. People will take advantage of a safe, lawful, and orderly path if it is presented to them, and we are cutting out the smuggling organizations precisely for the reasons that Senator Cruz mentioned. With respect to fentanyl, we are bringing the fight to the cartels in an unprecedented way. We have surged resources, most recently in Operation Blue Lotus, which is already demonstrating significant results. We are using our personnel, our extraordinary personnel. We are using technology. We are using everything that we can bring to bear to fight the scourge of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids. We are also requesting of Congress additional resources so that we can enhance that fight. We need to work together to address a challenge that precedes this administration and we need to work on it together. It is something that is killing far too many Americans.
I agree. Thank you. And as you know, there's many of the ideas, proposals that you and the White House have suggested that I agree with and support, and several that have been proposed or suggested that I don't agree with, and we're having those constructive, mature conversations. I want to make sure to touch base on a couple of other important issues, including the Shelter and Services Program. I was pleased to lead the effort last year to ensure there was adequate funding for the program, which was formerly known as the Emergency Food and Shelter Program that allows reimbursements for non-governmental organizations and local entities that provide shelter, transportation, and other services to migrants at the border. Again, security and humanity in the process. It was previously housed under FEMA. Now the program is under CBP. So I just raised it to acknowledge this transition and formally request regular updates on the implementation of the new program to ensure that the entities that rely on these funds to play that supportive role that they have been can continue to access the funds that we make available.
I appreciate your support of that program. The funding is critically needed. We have funded the Emergency Food and Shelter Program with $350 million of the $800 million. And of course, we are standing up the SSP, it's known by its acronym. And once that is stood up, of course, we will be funding that with the balance of the $800 million and distributing it to cities for their care of individuals here.
Next topic and next issue, something that we've had a couple conversations about. In 2022, the Army struggled to meet its recruiting goal of enlisting 60,000 soldiers. It only enlisted 45,000 that year. As our armed forces collectively look for ways to incentivize enlistment, one way, not the only way, but one way that has worked throughout our nation's history is to ask immigrants who enlist, or to ensure that immigrants who enlist are able to become citizens quickly as specified in the Immigration and Nationality Act. I understand that since July, the USCIS and the Department of Defense began work on a memorandum of agreement to formalize their partnership and to coordinate services for members of the military to naturalize early in their military careers. When do you expect that MOU to be finalized, and what tangible steps can we take to improve the naturalization rates of military service members?
Senator, thank you very much for that. It is remarkable that individuals have been willing to serve in our armed forces before they have become citizens. We've made tremendous progress with the Department of Defense to allow individuals to naturalize who are serving in our armed forces at an earlier stage, and we're going to be moving quickly on that now. We had a very significant development yesterday on that.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you on that as well. And in my time remaining, I just wanted to acknowledge earlier in the hearing, you brought up FEMA, actually in your opening statement, with the appropriate attention to Mississippi, where the tornadoes and their impact are dominating the national news right now. But I also feel a responsibility to remind my colleagues and you and the country about the California communities who continue to experience an onslaught of devastating atmospheric rivers and the devastation in the wake of recent storms. Entire communities have been flooded. Farms are underwater. Thousands of families being evacuated from their homes, and many who will either not be able to return to work anytime soon or return to their home anytime soon. And I want to specifically call attention to the community of Pájaro, which is a small, low-income, predominantly farm worker community that has for decades been overlooked by FEMA, frankly, agencies at all levels of government, but specifically the Trump-era individual assistance regulation under FEMA is exacerbating the hardship. California struggled to meet FEMA thresholds for disaster assistance because the regulation established a new factor called the state fiscal capacity and resource availability to be considered when FEMA evaluates the need for individual assistance. So this isn't the public assistance for communities, cities, municipalities, et cetera, to rebuild. We're talking individual assistance here. The rule has resulted in significant disparities and inequities. It's left out disaster survivors like those in Grizzly Flats, suffered from wildfires just a couple of years ago. Without the support they need, communities like this continue to wait in limbo as California waits to tally up more and more damage than other states just to get the same level of federal assistance. So I wanted to put that on your radar. I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this in HISGAC in the coming weeks, but we have to fix these clear inequities in federal guidelines and regulations. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.